Hello, everyone. Welcome to Winnipeg Sports Talk. My name is Hrabchak, and today we've got some bonus WST Sunday Live content for you. In a second here, I'm going to be joined by Lyss, Houde, and together we're going to be joined by Dimitri Filipovic of the Hockey PDOcast. This was a great conversation coming right out of the Jets, clinching their first ever Central Division title. I think you'll enjoy it. Let's get to that interview now. Hello, everyone. Welcome into WST Sunday Live on a Monday. Some bonus content for you here. My name's Hrabchak. She's Lyss, Houde. You tune in with us every Sunday at 9 a.m., of course. But bonus content today, we've got Dimitri Filipovic from the Hockey PDOcast joining us. Dimitri, how are you doing?
Sorry for messing up the schedule. I wish we could have recorded earlier on the Sunday to make it work for your guys' regular programming, but I'm really happy to be on and join you guys.
Yeah, and it's coming at a great time as well. We wanted to get you on, and we're so happy that you were able to. Thank you so much. And the Winnipeg Jets just clinched their first ever division title. The Central Division is going to run through Winnipeg in the playoffs. Just want to start with maybe your blanket thoughts on the Winnipeg Jets season so far. They're at 114 points, 55 wins, tons of franchise records. Connor Hellebuyck having a great year. Nationally, when you've been able to tune in, what have you thought of the Winnipeg Jets this year?
Yeah, I've made a point of watching them a lot this year. I've really enjoyed the way they play. I think it's so unique, especially as you're seeing teams around the league kind of every summer trying to totally transform their team, add new players. The Jets have kind of gone the other way with the continuity, and even after last year's disappointment, bringing back relatively all the same guys. And so I think you can see that when you watch them play, right? All the short passing, how in sync they are, the structure, everyone kind of supporting each other. So I think it makes for beautiful hockey, and I've been really high on them. I was a bit disappointed, as I'm sure you both were at the deadline, because I really wanted to see them make an all-in swing and add in an impact player to potentially improve the second line center position or even on the blue line. But it's undeniable the impact that certainly Brandon Tanev's had on the fourth line, even what you've seen from Luke Shed, and they've taken their game up as a team to a whole new level since the Four Nations. So I feel like it's a great time for us to chat about them, and I'm loving what I'm seeing from them recently.
Yeah, I mean, it comes at a great time too. There's just so many things. The worlds collided, stars aligned to get this conversation going because you spoke with our fan favorite Murat Atesh on the Hockey PDOcast earlier, just a couple days ago. It was a great conversation. Obviously, if folks haven't tuned into that yet, we definitely encourage them to do so. But you talked with him a little bit about how this Winnipeg Jets team, though in roster composition, looks similar to last year's team. The Rick Bowness, Scott Arniel change is a big one, but they look like a different team kind of across the board. A lot of the underlying metrics are a lot more encouraging in terms of looking ahead to playoff success than they were last year. Just kind of give us your blanket thoughts, maybe the Coles notes kind of that Murat conversation about why you're a little bit higher on the group this year than you were last.
Yeah, obviously last year, especially with that winning streak they had heading into postseason, they were doing well in terms of goal share and obviously points in the standings, but they were kind of relatively pedestrian in terms of especially the 5-on-5 metrics. They were just over 50% all across the board. And they were again to start this year. I think they can certainly get by on efficiency with having Connor Hellebuyck in net. He's probably going to stop more pucks than your typical goalie. And then some of the finishers they have up front, but they're carrying the play much more now. They're second in the league, I think, since the Four Nations, as I said, in expected goal share and high danger chance share at 5-on-5. And so that puts them into some really elite company to go along with the league's best power play, the league's best goalie. And now all of a sudden, it feels like the fully realized version of what they could be. And they're checking a lot more boxes for me than they did at this time last year. So I do get the skepticism nationally from people needing to see it from this team, right? I think people were really high on them heading into last postseason, and they obviously crashed and burned in a very tragic way in that 5-game series against Colorado. This doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to be a different outcome for them, but at least this year, with, as you said, controlling things in the Central, they'll get a relatively easier matchup in round one. I think they'll be able to build on confidence and shed some of those demons, get into round two. And then if they do play Colorado again in the rematch, I think they're just much better positioned to win that series, but at least make it an incredibly competitive one, unlike what we saw from them last year.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, at least I think, and you and Murat touched on this as well, Dylan Samberg's emergence. The Winnipeg Jets have a much more efficient, a much better second pairing than they did last year. And no slight to Brendan Dillon, but Dylan Samberg has stepped up and been an elite top four defenseman. Dimitri, every single Sunday morning, I say the Winnipeg Jets record with Dylan Samberg in the lineup. It's now at 44, 12, and 2. So I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you brought up Dylan Samberg many times on the PDO cast. We love it. He's so underrated. Just maybe speak to what you've seen from Samberg this year and how that changes the dynamic of the Jets blue line.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal player. And as you said, no slight to Brendan Dillon, friend of my podcast as well. He came on at the end of
Yeah.
last year. He's a great guy and I think a really good player. But Samberg's just given him a totally different element. He's quickly emerged as one of the best, most reliable shutdown defensemen in the league. Kind of what makes the Jets special as a team this year is exactly what he does in terms of like always being in the right place. He's never going to do the long bomb stretch pass to send in a guy on a breakaway, but instead he's going to make like a very effective short pass to either his partner Neil Pionk or to a winger along the boards, and then they're just going to get cleanly out of the zone, and that allows them to function the way they do at 5-on-5. And I do think when you're comparing this year's Jets team to the one last year, him elevating in role in 5-on-5 usage, playing as many minutes as he does, allows them then I think in a matchup against the Colorado to use him and Pionk a bit more against Nathan McKinnon, for example, and then hopefully free up both Morrissey and DeMello to attack a bit more offensively. We know how incredible Josh Morrissey is as a creator offensively in the O zone. And so just giving him more opportunities to do so and not having to expend all of his energy chasing Nathan McKinnon around the defensive zone, I think is something that they just didn't really have the luxury of last year. So the combination of what Samberg does himself and then what he frees up Morrissey to do, I feel like is a really important piece when you're discussing this year's Jets team.
100%. And I think that, the whole idea of like what a player does cannot just be talked about in isolation. It's also about how it impacts the other folks on the team, whether it's the partners, the pairings, the line mates, or, the other guys in the other line. So couldn't agree more. But you know what, Connor, you got a chance to plug your truther guy and my
Yeah.
forever, the hill I will always die on. And, we had a nice shootout goal from him, just last game to kind of cement my opinions. Dimitri, I know you're also a fan of Cole Perfetti. I am a Cole Perfetti believer till I die. So I want to give you kind of a chance to talk about him a little bit too, because I know that that's a guy who, if you want to talk about, again, was on the roster last year, but that in and of itself doesn't really explain the context of what his role in the team looked like last year compared to this year. So give our boy some love here at Cole Perfetti and what he's been able to do with that second line.
Oh, gladly. You guys are making life easy for me. Get me in here, talk about Dylan Samberg and Cole Perfetti. I could do this all day. No, that shootout goal he scored to close out the game in Chicago was unbelievable. Almost like real time didn't do it justice. Like you could see that obviously he scored, and I was like, oh, he must have done something nice. And then you watch the replay, especially that one angle where you can see how he baits Spencer Knight to go to stretch out his leg and then just tucks it in 5-0. It was a thing of beauty. It was very Datsukian in a way. Yeah, I think obviously last year, it was a big point of contention for anyone that was thinking about this logically or was following the Jets, being like, I don't understand why this guy is not playing to start the series in the first 4 games. And then you watch him, especially at that start of that game 5, and it's like, all right, the one guy who's actually creating stuff every time he's out there is Cole Perfetti. It sure would have been nice to have had him for the first 4 games. And he's clearly taken his game to a new level this year. I think most importantly, he gives them another guy to go along with Nikolai Ehlers and Kyle Connor that can sort of freelance and create either a scoring chance or a goal out of thin air almost, and can play without sort of outside of the team structure that the Jets typically play offensively through. And so in a series against a Colorado or further along in the postseason, you need guys like that. And so I love to see this development and progression from him. And I really feel like, I mean, we've already seen him score so many beautiful goals. I think the one he scored to essentially end the Canucks season a couple weekends ago was a real like full display of what he's capable of. I think he's going to do more and more of that moving forward with more opportunity as he gets stronger and better over the course of his career. And so, yeah, I feel like he's a major X factor for the Jets heading into this postseason.
We've talked about Perfetti. We've talked about Samberg. Thanks for coming on. We'll wrap it up.
That's it.
It's time to actually complete the trifecta. Gabe Vilardi time. He's been injured for a few weeks now. We haven't been doing the Macarena there at Canada Life Center when he scores his goals, but Gabriel Vilardi, unbelievable hands around the net, power play, is so much different with and without him because of what he can do at the side of the net. I know you guys did a deep dive on Gabriel Vilardi's game, like a full film deep dive on his game a few months ago, or maybe that was last year even. What can you say about a player like Gabe Vilardi and the very unique skill set that he brings both to the power play and the Jets top line?
Yeah, he's such a throwback player. You don't see a lot of guys in the modern NHL at that size with that skill level with their hands and what he can create. I do. I don't know. I'm kind of speak out of the both sides of my mouth here because on the one hand, I love his game and I love the element he brings to the Jets top line, and especially the top power play, as you said, Connor. I do think, though, as you watch these games, I've been really impressed with what Alex Iafallo has brought to that top line. Their 5-on-5 metrics have significantly improved. It makes sense, right? He's sort of the perfect glue guy in terms of he doesn't need the puck on his stick. You prefer it to be on both Connor and Scheifele's stick instead. He'll just forecheck. He'll come back defensively on time. He'll crash the net. He'll create additional opportunities for them at 5-on-5. And so I think it brings up an interesting question when Vilardi hopefully does come back to start the postseason, what Scott Arniel does with that, whether he sticks with his top line and moves Vilardi into more of a middle six role, or whether he just goes back to that and sends Iafallo back down the lineup. I think it's a good problem to have. Certainly, I'm curious to see what they do with it, though. I like Scheifele and Connor are so good when the pace ramps up a little bit, and especially Connor, you just get him out on the rush, you give him more space to attack downhill. And so having Iafallo there, I think affords them the opportunity to do so. They don't necessarily have to wait up as often for Vilardi to make his way down the ice and join them. And so they're certainly reaping the rewards of that and getting more out of those two guys at 5-on-5 right now. So yeah, I'm really curious to see. I don't know if you two have a take on what they should do or kind of what the lineup's going to look like at full health.
Well, I mean, I think both Connor and I can say with pretty strong confidence that we know what they'll do, and it's not keep Alex Iafallo up there. I think that team, they've been pretty married to that top line since the beginning of the season, and credit to them. A lot of folks were pretty upset in the Jets circles that they chose to start the year with that line because they didn't get to play as much as they wanted to together last year, just because Vilardi had a couple injuries. Connor was out for a bit as well, but a lot of folks really, really liked what was it? Ehlers, Scheifele, Vilardi is the big one that everyone really enjoyed and wanted to see more of that. But credit to Scott Arniel for kind of sticking with it. And they had decent 5-on-5 results for a lot of the season. But I completely agree with you that I think that the element that Alex Iafallo brings to that line gives them a little bit more dimension. But the question then is, what do you do with Gabe Vilardi then? Because I'm not really sure in terms of, you then have 5 wingers that essentially have to play in your top 6 because Perfetti and Ehlers can't really bump down in that same capacity. So it's very interesting. And I think that they'll probably go back to that, ideal top line that they want. But Alex Iafallo has been such a treat for this team. And our third co-host on Winnipeg Sports Talk Sunday Live, our good friend Jacob Stoller from sportsnet.ca, Alex Iafallo is his guy. We all have our own kind of guys that we like to truth about as often as we can. Connor's is Samberg, mine's Perfetti. He's a big Alex Iafallo guy. So I think, it's been nice to see kind of what he's come and been able to do in that top line. But we talked about the 5-on-5 metrics, and I think it's fascinating. I was doing a couple of quick digs before we started this, and the Jets only draw about 17 penalty minutes per hour. Like, they're really not that high in terms of penalties drawn, but they also are only 6th in penalty minutes taken too. So they play a lot of their game at 5-on-5. But that's kind of unfortunate in the sense that they have had a good power play for a lot of the season. Granted, the back half not as good as how they started out. But I just want to hear your thoughts on that 1-3-1 power play that the Winnipeg Jets have had so much fun running this year, considering the stark contrast of what it looked like last year and how horrible it was to watch, to the point where you almost wanted the team to decline power plays, and the resurgence that they've seen with Davis Payne and this new power play, this like enlightened grouping that they've been able to do so much, not just with the first unit, but with the second as well.
Yeah, it's a massive weapon. I mean, obviously, just getting Nick Ehlers up there all year, I think, has helped a lot. And as Murat was pointing out on my show, he's not even necessarily doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the zone entries and getting the puck into the zone. But I feel like you can feel his presence when he's out there in terms of his quickness retrieving pucks, giving them additional opportunities to stay in the zone, and then obviously how talented he is as a player. So yeah, I think it makes sense, right? When we talk about the Jets, and one of the most charming things about them being that continuity, that essentially the same guys being out there for as long as they have such a connection in terms of the precision passing and how they can pick you apart down low. And that's really fun to watch. I think it's massive, regardless of the number of opportunities in a playoff series where you go against a Colorado, you know that they're going to be dangerous on their own power play opportunities, to not have that be a massive weak link for you, right? Like similar to what's happened to the Kings the past couple of years, every time they play the Oilers, the disparity between the two power plays is ultimately the difference in those series. And so I think that's a massive feather in their cap this year. The penalty rates in terms of both for and against are interesting. I'm not really sure what to make of that. I think it makes sense that as if you're either not drawing them or not taking them yourselves, we know NHL referees kind of like to even it out over the course of a game. So it generally one kind of correlates with the other, and maybe that's what's happening there. But it seems like they considering how much they have the puck, especially over these past 25 games or so, you'd think they would have drawn more power plays or more power play opportunities along the way. And so hopefully that's something that upticks a little bit as we get into the postseason, but we'll see. But yeah, I think to go along with the 5-on-5 stuff, the power play just being so much more of a weapon this year is a massive difference with this year's version.
Yeah, the rates you brought up there, Tesh from The Athletic actually had a tweet the other day saying how since the Four Nations, the Jets are first or second in expected goals for percentage and top 10 in shot share, but like in the mid 20s, bottom 10 in penalties drawn. So I don't really know what's going on there. Whistles are getting put away for the Winnipeg Jets, but without Gabe Vilardi, the power play is definitely taking a step back, and they'll need to refine that groove going into the postseason. The postseason, where the Winnipeg Jets have clinched the 1 seed in the Western Conference in the Central Division. Wanted to get your thoughts. Money Puck has the Calgary Flames at a 10.2% chance. We won't touch on the Flames because I don't know. It has to be closer than that for me to loop them into this conversation. But between the Minnesota Wild and the St. Louis Blues, who do you think Jets fans should feel better about playing? I know the Blues have been red hot since the Four Nations break. The Jets just beat the Blues a few games ago as well. What have you seen from the Blues specifically since the Four Nations, since Jim Montgomery took over? And how scared should Jets fans be of a 2019 repeat?
I don't think you should be too scared about it. I mean, it's the NHL postseason. You're going to have to beat good teams along the way. There's no gimmies, certainly. I think both are fine matchups for the Jets. They present their own set of problems, right? The Wild, you can almost throw their season-long numbers out the window because so much of that has come without Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson-Ek, and Jared Spurgeon just got hurt again, and Brodin was out for a while. So we haven't really seen this full complement of Wild players yet. You watch them the past 2 games over this weekend, and they went into Calgary and got absolutely thumped by the Flames. And then we're down 2-0 to an undermanned Canucks team on Saturday before rallying and winning it in overtime. So I feel like that's a pretty beatable team. You kind of just have to load up defensively on the Kaprizov minutes, hope you can sort of play them to a draw, and you should be able to win all of the other minutes you play against them. The Blues are more interesting. That, you know, they haven't had Holloway for the past couple of games, and I feel like that's really zapped them of a lot of the juice they had previously. But dating back to the coaching change, like, they've been a really good 5-on-5 team. They've improved significantly defensively. They just got Colton Parayko back last night as well, and so they would be a fascinating matchup. We got to see them head to head. We got to see the Jets end that 12-game winning streak of theirs, and it really felt like that was kind of like a playoff type of style as well, right? There was so little open space. It was more low event. It was really just like a hardworking, grinded out game, and the Jets dominated that one, and they really took it to them at 5-on-5. They played really well at home, and so I feel like that should be a confidence builder if that matchup does come. So I don't know, to answer your question, I'm okay from the Jets perspective with both of those. It won't necessarily be an easy matchup, but I think certainly a winnable one that the Jets should be pretty heavily favored in. And I guess I would say I would rather face the Wild just because I feel like they have a bit less to offer up and down the lineup. But of course, going against Kaprizov could always, pose its own set of challenges, and he could just go off and have like 12 points in 5 games, and all of a sudden it's a pretty difficult matchup. So, yeah, I don't know. I like either of them for the Jets, to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think it's, like you said, you do have to beat every team along the way to get to those 16 wins if that's what you're going for. But it's definitely a better outcome for the Winnipeg Jets right now to have one of those teams up on the docket as opposed to the Colorado Avalanche, who, like you said, same thing, kind of got to throw away the full season metrics for that team, seeing what they've done, especially since the trade deadline. They're another beast, and we'll get to that in a second. But it is interesting. I was digging into some natural stat trick stuff before this episode in terms of the head-to-heads with the Minnesota Wild and the St. Louis Blues, and obviously the Winnipeg Jets have had the Minnesota Wild's number a little bit more so in the last little while, kind of similar, the inverse of the Vegas series where they just can't seem to win against the Jets as of late. But the Jets they have like a 72% win percentage against their division opponents, right? Which is higher than their league-wide win percentage, which is pretty impressive considering that there is some strength to this Central Division. But I was looking into the microstats a little bit, and even against the Minnesota Wild, like, they're rocking like a 51% expected goal share, and like they got outchanced by the St. Louis Blues in their series this year, even though they ended up taking it 3-1 and outscoring the Minnesota Wild 11-2 in actual goals, but only hanging with like a 50%, 51% high danger chance. And like, I'm just curious to kind of hear your thoughts in terms of like the long-term outlook, and in terms of if you think that the Winnipeg Jets have played well enough against these teams this year. Obviously, wins are all created a little bit differently, but if given, a back-to-back-to-back of 4 to 7 games against these teams, if the adjustments are going to be there for the Winnipeg Jets to be able to kind of manage the fact that these teams can hang with them, and they have been hanging with them for a lot of the year.
Yeah, I mean, they're quality teams. They're certainly capable of hanging with them. I guess I'd say, the one recent game during this stretch that we were talking about where the Jets have really improved at 5-on-5 was that one game against the Blues last Monday, and they acquitted themselves quite fine. And I think they were in the high 50s in terms of expected goal share in that game. So I think that's probably more reflective of where they're at in that matchup than maybe some of the early season stuff when they played those teams a lot. In thinking about it though, I know this is like the least analytical take ever, but I feel like from a storytelling perspective, having to go St. Louis, Colorado, Vegas, and then facing Paul Maurice in the Stanley Cup Final would be like the perfect sort of shedding all of your previous demons and
100%.
eliminating
Do
all
you
of them
want me
along
to
the
go
way.
gray? Oh my god.
The NHL playoffs are never that neat, of course, and it would be a very difficult path certainly, but I feel like that would be a neat one.
And you mentioned Colorado there. I want to get your thoughts on one of the locked-in matchups that we do have, and that is Dallas and Colorado. One of the perks to the Winnipeg Jets getting the 1 seed in the Central is avoiding both of those teams. And I gotta say, Dimitri, I've been watching the Dallas Stars over the past couple of weeks here, from a Winnipeg Jets perspective to see if the Jets would be able to clinch this 1 seed. And in my opinion, looking at the metrics, they have not been playing good hockey. I think goaltending is covering up a lot of issues for them. Do you think that can maybe bite them in a first round series going up against Colorado, who's been playing good hockey since the Four Nations break and since the trade deadline, versus a team against Dallas, where a lot of comparables to the Jets last year with that 8-game winning streak, where they're really not controlling the flow of play at 5-on-5, but getting good goaltending and kind of bailing them out?
Yeah, they've been getting hammered defensively. You could see it in that game they played on Thursday, where they were kind of hanging around for the first half of the game or so, and then guys like CC and Dumba just make mistakes because they're so slow at this point of their career, cost them, and they can't really keep up. They've been giving up so many shots against. I think they're averaging like 33 or 34 shots against per game since Miro Heiskanen went out, and it sounds like he probably won't be back for round one, or certainly to start that series at the very least. And so I wouldn't expect them, if things keep going this way, you never know. The postseason starts. Sometimes the switch magically flips. Team looks different. They're more motivated. That could happen. We know the Stars have plenty of firepower up front and they can outscore some of these problems. So they're not a gimme matchup by any means. But I feel like if you're Colorado, you're probably looking at that and being like, all right, it's pretty exploitable on our end. And I feel like we can take it to them, especially with their reinforced depth since the deadline. So yeah, I mean, these final 20-25 games, sometimes you got to apply context in terms of like who's playing, who's not, if a team's kind of locked into their position and they're motivated. In this case, the Stars have been, because up until this past week, they had a pretty realistic shot of potentially catching the Jets and winning that Central Division. And so they had every reason to play their best, and we haven't seen it from them for weeks now. And that's just not a good strategy heading into the playoffs. So yeah, I'm high on the Stars still moving forward, because at the deadline, they obviously got Rantanen for 8 years. They extended Wyatt Johnston. They're going to bring back the same team with Miro Heiskanen next year. So I think, heading into the following season, they're probably going to be my Stanley Cup pick, but I feel like this year might be a bit of a sort of walkover season for them in terms of like, all right, we're probably going to lose in round one to Colorado and then just come back at full force next year instead.
Speaking of a walkover season, I want to talk a little bit about some more league-wide stuff, maybe specifically kind of in the Western Conference, just because we're so locked in over here on what's kind of going on there. And I have been kind of beating the drum of the LA Kings for the last little bit. And I think Edmonton is another team that can fall into that category in terms of, like, obviously we know they were so close to achieving last year. And that was, at the hands of two guys kind of dragging that team along on their backs, and those guys maybe not playing at 100% this year, which is a crazy thing to say considering what Draisaitl's been able to do. But we know that health is a little bit of a concern with those two all-stars right now. Curious to hear your thoughts on LA and Edmonton, and if, coming out of that bottom part of the Pacific of the Western Conference playoff bracket there, we're not getting ahead of ourselves. We're not saying the Winnipeg Jets are making the Western Conference Finals by any means, but, it's important to keep an eye on the other folks that are kind of hanging out in that Western Conference and what that playoff picture looks like outside of just the Central Division. And, who better to talk about it than someone who's also on the West Coast and watches these teams as much as you do. So curious to kind of hear your thoughts, maybe not necessarily just from like a eventual Jets opponent perspective, but just on that LA Edmonton series that we're going to see again. And then also Vegas against the other of Minnesota and St. Louis.
Yeah. I mean, similar to what we said about the Jets, the Kings are going to have that sort of, I'm going to have to see it to believe it for a lot of people because we've seen this matchup for 3 straight years. And there's been times throughout, maybe not last year because it was a pretty definitive win by the Oilers, but there were times where people were like, oh, the Kings, might finally get over the hump here. They're either leading the series or they're doing a lot of stuff to really pressure the Oilers. And then ultimately just kind of not having McDavid and Draisaitl was the difference in those matchups. They're playing much better than the Oilers right now. Now, with the caveat that McDavid just came back 2 games ago, Draisaitl's been out. Ekholm now sounds like he's going to miss the postseason. Is a massive loss for the Oilers. I think the big difference this year, well, there's 3 of them for the Kings. One is Darcy Kemper is playing remarkably well, and in previous seasons they've had like Phoenix Copley or Cam Talbot or David Rittich, and it's like, all right, it's not a big edge for us to net versus the Oilers. It feels like with the way Kemper's been playing recently, it actually is for them this season. They're going to have home ice, and they've been by far the best home ice team in the league this year. I think they've only lost 5 games in regulation so far at Crypto. And the third one is just what we've seen from Byfield, right? Kind of taking that next step in the second half this year, him and Fiala giving them a legitimately dynamic line. They brought in Andrei Kuzmenko at the deadline as well, and he's fit in really nicely with Kempe and Kopitar. So they have a bit more scoring punch now. I still, I'm going to be doing my playoff previews next week. I still probably wouldn't be comfortable picking the Oilers to lose just because you don't want to be the person who's like betting against McDavid and Draisaitl and then you watch the games play out and you're like, instant regret. But the Kings are certainly, I think, in the best position they've been in these 4 years to finally beat them in that series. I will say though, like a theme for me all season has been the Golden Knights kind of just sneakily flying under the radar, right? Like they haven't made any big trades. They didn't really do anything at the deadline. They brought in Riley Smith and Brendan Saad from the Blues, but there's been relatively drama free from them. No LTIR shenanigans this year. No one's been talking about them, and they've just been comfortably sitting atop the Pacific. They're dominant defensively again. And so I feel like they could make a long run and get to that conference final. And if it is Jets Golden Knights, I know that the Golden Knights have had their number for the most part in the past, but the most recent meeting we saw in Vegas was a really great game by the Jets. And I do have my theories about how like Bruce Cassidy's very passive defensive system is a good thing for the Jets to sort of pick apart in a playoff series because it gives them just more space to operate and work their passing and get into where they want to on the ice. And so if we do see that, it'd be a really fun one. I think it'd be super competitive, but that's probably a matchup the Jets should feel pretty good about. So yeah, I don't know. The Pacific's really interesting. I feel like any of those 3 teams we mentioned could very easily be a representative in the conference finals, and they all have their own sets of strengths and weaknesses, but it's gonna be fun to see kind of who comes out of that pack.
We're talking here with Dimitri Filipovic from the Hockey PDOcast. You can obviously download that wherever you get your favorite podcast. I just want to mention the ideal playoff run that you outlined there for the Jets, where it goes St. Louis, Colorado, Vegas. I think Vegas is the one team that Jets fans want it back most on for that 2017-18 run. And Marc-Andre Fleury just like stealing games outright in that series. So that would be an awesome Western Conference Finals. I just want to get your thoughts on the East. A lot of the matchups, okay, we have one locked in matchup, New Jersey and Carolina, but the other ones are, above a 90% probability. We're probably going to see the Battle of Ontario between Toronto and Ottawa, the Battle of Florida between Tampa Bay and Florida, and then Washington versus Montreal, the up-and-coming Montreal Canadiens. Of those 4 series, Dimitri, which one are you most excited for?
It has to be the Battle of Florida, just because I feel like both the Panthers and the Lightning are probably 2 of the best 4 or 5 teams in the league, and one of them is going to be out in round 1. Obviously, all of the history between the two, all the recent playoff matchups they've had, the in-state rivalry certainly, and how many good players are going to be in that series, and just kind of watching Kucherov versus Barkov and Forsling and how that plays out. They play each other this week, I think on Tuesday, and that might determine home ice in that matchup, which I feel like is going to go a long way for both those teams. So that'll be a fun thing to watch this week. And yeah, I'm very excited. I'm a bit sad they're playing each other, just because I would like to see them both advance because they both play such fun hockey. But assuming they're all at full health, and we'll see with the Panthers, they obviously had a bunch of guys out down the stretch here. If they get them all back and Ekblad comes back game 3 after a suspension, just the quality of hockey in that series, I feel like is going to be must watch for all hockey fans.
Yeah, I feel like we all kind of fall into that same category of like at the end of the day, we are hockey fans, and like anything that's going to have a good story, good fun hockey to watch, we're all sat, we're all ready for it. I think I don't know, I'll speak about this pretty confidently. I think we've had a good season so far in terms of like, there's been a lot of really fun hockey going on this season. Obviously, the Four Nations kind of really enhances that as well. Like, that was just such a fun stretch of time as well. But it's been a fun season, and the wildcard races are almost coming down to the wire. They've been really good. You know, March was really competitive after the trade deadline. Thought we had an awesome trade deadline. I loved everything about the Mikko Rantanen trades, plural. You know, Gabe Landeskog coming back. That's super fun. And we also have a goalie as one of the front runners for the Hart Trophy this year, which is another pretty fun thing to talk about. So this has been a conversation that I feel like whether it be mainstream media or league-wide media, because that's with something like the Hart Trophy, you just have to talk about it kind of regardless. And Connor Hellebuyck has been in pretty much every conversation since, you know, whether it be the new year or even earlier in terms of the Hart Trophy. And, you know, Nikita Kucherov is a guy who's kind of climbing up the ranks there. And there's been some questions around time missed for guys like McKinnon and Draisaitl in terms of that. But just curious to kind of to platform your Hart Trophy takes here, just because, you know, we're coming up on the end of the show here, but we would be remiss if we didn't talk about Connor Hellebuyck, at least in some regard, when talking about the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have a vote for a year like this, because I feel like would be losing so much sleep over it, trying to make sure I get it right and do my due diligence. I've given it a lot of thought still, even without that vote. And I'm a couple weeks ago, I probably would have said I was leaning Draisaitl, just because I felt like what he was doing this year just went so above and beyond every other one of his skater peers, because you know, he had answered all the questions we had about him. Like, he wasn't a power play merchant. He was doing so much of his scoring at 5-on-5 and even strength. He wasn't playing with McDavid. He was playing with guys like Bud Colson and Corey Perry and Victor Arvidsson, and he was carrying them. All of his 5-on-5 defensive metrics were through the roof. He was the most dominant 5-on-5 player in the league, and he was leading the goal scoring race by like 10 goals or whatever at the time. And it's like, all right, you put that all together and it's pretty unassailable. He's missed a bunch of time since then. He's probably going to finish the season in like around 71, 72 games played. And I still think he has a very compelling case. I do think that, especially with the Jets on the verge of winning the President's Trophy, winning the West outright, with Hellebuyck's consistency along the way, right? Like, he doesn't necessarily have the degree of difficulty of some goalies we've seen over the years, where it's like, all right, he's having to stand on his head every night and make 35 to 40 saves and all these highlight reel ones. He's so much more composed and calm and structured in terms of his approach, but he just hasn't really had any dips in his play. Like, it's been so consistent all year at the most inconsistent position. He gives them such a high margin for error as a team. I think he's up to 26 games this year where he's given up 1 goal or less. And so clearing that bar as a team, it's like, all right, if we score 1 or 2 goals tonight, we have a good chance of winning. I feel like is unbelievable, especially in today's setting when league average save percentage is 900 and he's at 925 himself. So you put all that together, and I feel like if there's ever a year to vote for a goalie in the Hart, this would be it. And he certainly earned it. And I'm generally pretty reluctant to include goalies in this, because I just feel like inherently goalies are by definition the most valuable player. And so once you start kind of opening that can of worms, it's like, all right, well, the Hart ballot should just be all the best goalies in the league because they were clearly the most valuable. But I feel like he separated himself so much from the rest of the competition at his position that he's a very worthy either first or second place vote this season. And right now I'm leaning towards first, because I just feel like, especially with Draisaitl missing that time, Hellebuyck has every step of the way done everything he's been asked to do.
Well, we love that pick here in Winnipeg. And I know the people watching in the comments, Winnipeg Sports Talk Sunday Live bonus content will really appreciate it. Dimitri, thank you so much for this. Before we let you go, I know you haven't started your playoff preview series yet, and I know nothing's definitive, probably waiting on some health question marks around the league. Can we get a Stanley Cup final pick from you on the way out?
Oh man, you're gonna put me in the spot here, hey.
Yeah,
You know what?
yeah.
Let's suck up to the audience. Let's go Jets coming out of the West. And
Nice.
let's
Yeah.
go with, even though their path is going to be really difficult, they might not even have home ice in any series. I still feel like Florida at full health is going to be the best team. You look at the forward group and it's just absurd. It's like an all-star team quality group. And so I think the Florida Panthers make it back for a 3rd straight year, which is a remarkable accomplishment in its own right. And we get that Jets versus Paul Maurice matchup that I think Paul Maurice himself has been wishing for after he won last year.
Yeah.
He said now he wants.
And he said he wants the Jets to win it. So yeah, I hope they get to that too, because Paul doesn't want to win that series. So
there you go, Paul. We're holding you to it. The Jets' fate is in your hands.
Exactly. I personally think the winner of that Tampa Florida series is my cup pick out of the East. I think those are the two best teams in the East, at least for playoff hockey. I know Washington's had a great year, but love that pick. Thanks for being a good sport, putting you on the spot there. And on the way out, let people know where they can find the Hockey PDOcast. Great content that you're putting out there.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you both for having me on. This was really fun. As you said, the Hockey PDOcast available wherever you get your podcasts. We put out 4 or 5 shows a week. Heading into the postseason, we'll probably ramp that up even more and try to have one out every single night after the games conclude. So come along for the ride with us. It's gonna be really fun. We try to break down everything we're watching and mix in the numbers with the eye test and put it all together. And so it should be a really fun postseason. Hope it's a great one for the Jets, and you guys have plenty to talk about as well. And I'd love to come back on if you guys will have me.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for doing this. Check out the Hockey PDOcast. The playoff series previews were some of my favorite episodes last year, catching up around the league. So I'm really looking forward to that this year. Thanks, Dimitri. Take care, and we'll have you on again soon. Appreciate it.
Anytime.